We'll then dive a little. Oh, thank you. Also, shout out to Diana who just pressed the record button, and hello to everyone who's joining this recording. We're glad that you're here. This session is 10 ways to. It's the whole title. It's a long one. 10 ways to level up your college application before you click submit. I'm Tom. I'm joined with Han. We're so happy to be here with you. Going through these particular agenda points. We're going to talk about two particular personal statement structures that a college essay guy tend to know and love, and give you a sense of questions that you should ask yourself after you're reading through your own personal statement to see whether or not it's doing its job and whether or not it's communicating your skills, qualities, values, and interests to admissions officers. We'll then also spend some time talking about 3 ways to level up and improve your activities list if you've worked on that for your college applications. And then we'll spend some time at the end looking at supplemental essays, which are those college-specific essays, such as like, why do you want to go to Fordham University? Or talk about a time where you interacted with difference at Brown. Really love that. That's just me making up hypotheticals. If you're panicking and being like, I know Brown had a question like that, it probably doesn't. And they change year to year. So we'll go into kind of some tips about how to up-level your supplemental essay work at this stage. And then we'll also talk about how to put together, Hannah is going to put together a little demo, I guess, or a walkthrough application of a student that she worked with a couple of years ago, who we feel did a lot of these things really, really successfully, just to give you that source of inspiration as you are sent off. Anything else I'm missing, Hannah? You want to mention?
All sounds good.
Get going?
Yeah.
Lovely.
That sounds great.
Just some housekeeping items, just because we know sometimes people are going to ask about it. So the session, as you can see, is being recorded, maybe a little late, but it's okay. You missed some intros. Our bios are on the website. And if you are interested in asking us questions, we love that. And we would love for you to do that. You'll notice that this is a Zoom webinar platform. So rather than using the chat box, which you may have used before for a regular Zoom meeting, you're going to want to use the Q&A box that you should see at the bottom of your screen, question and answer. So we won't be using the raise hand function. You won't be able to use the chat function. That's actually where Diana, our wonderful moderator extraordinaire, will be dropping in any links that we mentioned during today's session. That way you have those at your disposal later on as you're working on your applications. You'll also get all of these links in email, as an email follow-up as well. So just so you know, Q&A box is the place to go ask questions, ask them at any point. And we're going to try to get to as many as we can at the end. Okay, so today's weather is sponsored by Chapel Roan Feminine Anonon. JK, not really. We are not sponsored by any outside affiliates. However, as Han and I were putting together the content for this session, we noticed that a lot of the sample essays and examples that we're about to show you today have to do generally with the theme of women's empowerment, and particularly female students really weaving that into their voicing that identity as part of their college application and centering a lot of their experiences as high school students on issues related to women's empowerment, feminism. So shout out to all of you young feminists out there doing the thing. But we have broader examples beyond that as well. It just tends to be the majority today. So, all right, as promised, 4 ways to know if your application is doing its job and what that actually is, right? So one of the first things that you'll want to do as you maybe are starting to complete some of your college application work, maybe you already have some stuff completed, maybe you're still very much a work in progress, whatever stage you're kind of at this process, something that we really encourage doing for students is a value scan and basically an application audit, where you go through all the different writing components that are in your application, you know, your personal statement, your activities list, your additional information section, if you've decided to use that optional space to explain, you know, extenuating circumstances or expanded descriptions of some of your extracurriculars, whatever it may be, as well as your supplemental essays. So ideally, when you're reading through your entire application as a whole, you know, one of my colleagues at Pomona College used to say, think about your application like a book. And as with any good book, you don't want to just read the same chapter over and over again. You want the story to continue. You want there to be more information coming at each different corner and at each turn of the page. And the admission officer is thinking the same thing, right? There's definitely moments where you may want to reiterate, and I was about to say repetitionize, feminine nomenon, where you may want to have some slight forms of repetition of that are really, really important to you. But in general, you have a decent amount of spaces and writing opportunities in your application, particularly if you're applying to more selective colleges that have college-specific supplemental essays that have those different questions related to their own individual institution. So having kind of a range of skills, qualities, values, identities, and experiences in there is really, really crucial. The second way to know if your application is doing its job is to know whether or not your personal statement is answering four really, really critical questions. And both Hannah and myself are going to walk through two sample personal statements, one of which is centered on a challenge-based essay, one about writing about challenges. Hannah's going to do that. And then I'm going to do one that's about something, if you have written an essay that's not as much about challenges that you faced, there's a different set of questions that we often recommend to students to ask yourself and audit your application with, to make sure it's doing its job. And then third, right, are you making the most of your activities list? We have some small tips and tricks that, in my opinion, are not these like drastic changes that you need to make to your activities list. We know that especially on the application, 150 characters is a tight squeeze, much like me these days, since I have not been going to the gym. So we are trying not to make drastic overhauls to your application at this stage, but rather give you some suggestions of some small things that you can maybe do here and there and evaluate to make your activities list pop as much as possible in an application process where admissions officers are moving through stuff really, really quickly and seeing a really similar ways of describing things. And so the idea is to help stand yourself out from the crowd with some of these tips. And then lastly, in terms of ways to know if your application is doing its job, making the most of your supplemental essays, right? These are essay questions that colleges wrote themselves with very particular rationales in mind. They really wanted students to show a certain alignment with the college that they represent, maybe an alignment with their mission, an alignment with their values, and really want to know what you specifically are going to contribute to a particular campus. So both Hannah and myself are going to walk through some examples to help you better understand how to accomplish that, making the most goal here. One of the first things that we recommend doing at College Essay Guide, and this is something that both Hannah and myself work with students individually one-on-one as essay coaches, and something that we often find to be really valuable is to put all of your essay and application work into a single document, right? You may be working right now in a Google Drive with version 20, version 3, of all these different application documents and drafts that maybe you've, spent, maybe not, maybe you have nothing, and that's totally okay. But the goal here is to kind of put everything in one place so that it's all in one spot, it's organized, and it's easier to kind of be able to do these audits and this kind of like, is my application doing its job scan when you have it all in one document, because that's the way that the admission officer is going to be reading your file, right? They're going to be starting with, of course, your academic side of things, your transcript, your recommendation letters, the information about your high school context. And then they're going to be moving into information about your family, your education history, your activities list, your personal statement, additional info, and those college-specific essays. So you kind of want to read your application in the order and the method that an admission officer might be doing. We gave you a template that Diana is going to be able to share in the Zoom chat, and again, you'll get it via email as well. And something else that I really recommend students doing is plugging in all of these things into your common application and getting that finished sooner than later, so that way you're not scrambling right before the deadline. And then you also are able to see a full PDF preview of your application to a particular college in the Common App, exactly how an admissions officer would read it with the exact same formatting. And you'll see if there's like any giant spaces between your essay or weird like formatted bolding that you didn't mean to do, but it happened because you copied it into the text box and it had its own games it was playing on you. It just makes sure that you know exactly what the person on the other end is going to see and can help make sure your application is as cleanly presented as possible. I'm not saying that you bolding your personal statement instead of unbolding it is like grounds for being denied at a school. College admissions officers are not looking for reasons to deny you. They're looking for reasons to admit you. At the same time, it's nice, speaking from experience reading applications for many years, when you have an application that's really clean and easy to move through and has things headers in the additional information section, or it's just really cleanly presented, because that way you're more primed to be able to get the core insights and values and life experiences and specific examples. You're more easily able to grab those as you're reading through an application and use those to advocate for a student in an admissions committee setting. There's also a quick little 40-second tutorial on how to pull this up in your Common App in case that's something you want to do. Okay. Once you have almost done doc put together and you have all your personal statement, your activities list, additional info, the supplemental essay for your different colleges, based usually on the order of the deadline that you need to submit in, something that's great to do is what's called a value scan. And if you're new to College Essay Guy, values exercise is something that is really, really kind of like a staple exercise. Hannah, out of curiosity, We have like top values that are in the bottom of our email signature. Do you happen to recall what we have on yours?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit, and I haven't changed it on my signature, but excellence is definitely one. I think you and I are similar in that. And truth and authenticity. Those are my top three.
We share authenticity of our top three. And the other one of my other ones is vulnerability and then fun. I like to think that my college application many years ago had some degree of that. But ideally, the values exercise, and there's just a YouTube video here that Ethan sadly couldn't be with us today, so I figured let me just put in and embed a video of him so that people get a little taste of his comforting voice. I'm so excited to share this one with you. This is one of my favorite exercises, and his new glasses look that he's been sporting more often. So Ethan has a video to walk you through the values exercise if you've never done it before. But essentially, it's a way for you to kind of look at a list of comprehensive values. I'd say there's probably 50 or so on that list, maybe a little more, and take some time to kind of read through those particular words and see what really resonates with you. And ideally, the different essay and application spaces that you put forward reflect those values in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you have a few that are in your personal statement. Maybe you have some other values that you didn't have airtime or weren't able to squeeze into that 650 word personal statement in your activities list, or in supplemental essays for different colleges. But the idea is if there are values, you start with 10, then you funnel it down to 5, then you funnel it down to 3. And ideally, at least you have those 3 core values like Hannah and myself shared somewhere present in your application and tied to examples in your writing. Bonus points if you can get up to 5. Even more bonus points if you can get up to 10 and have it be as cohesive as possible. So this video will be a great way to walk you through that exercise if you're interested in it. And 2 other ones that I liked that I'll just mention right now as well are linked as well. One of them is it'll allow you to make a forced copy of it. But it's the 10 things I want colleges to know about me list. I'd say that these questions, these 10 questions that are in here, are other ones that are really worth looking at and seeing. These are oftentimes questions that an admission officer is asking himself as they're moving through an application. So to do an audit on your application and get a sense of well, technically there's 11, but to do an audit on your application and ask yourself if a majority of these particular questions are being communicated in some way, shape, or form, that gives you your best bet that your application is as comprehensive as possible and showing you in the best light possible to an admission team and an admission officer. Another exercise that is a little newer on the college essay guide block. So if you're like, I've done the value exercise a million times, it's old news to me. The roles and identities exercise is a really, really new and exciting one that's super helpful with lots of different things. It's helpful with getting a sense of maybe roles and identities that you want to fold into your activities list, ways that you particularly show up, activities that you're involved in. Maybe these are roles that you occupy in your extracurricular clubs and teams that maybe you want to communicate in your supplemental essay. But this is another one to be able to maybe do at this stage and get a sense of whether these roles and identities that are really important to you are being reflected in your written work as well. All right, back to, let's do full screen mode, full screen, back to the slides. Okay. Hi friends, welcome back to the show. Sorry, Ethan, we gotta move on. Okay. So these are the 4 questions that you want to ask yourself when it comes to whether or not application is doing its job, whether your personal statement is doing its job. I mean, as you can see, the questions are a little different if you decided to write a personal statement about not as much about challenges that you overcome, or if you have written about challenges that you can overcome. Either route is okay. There's no one route that is better than the other in the college admission landscape. Hannah and I have worked with, hundreds of students, dozens of students between the 2 of us. I've read, hundreds of applications, and I've seen personal statements of all shapes, sizes, some of which have challenges, some of which have not, and both routes are totally okay. There's no right or wrong here. But what I would say is that ideally, whichever route you choose, you are thinking about these questions that you see here on the screen for both of these routes. For the sake of time, I'll just dive right into the not challenge one, which is an example essay that has been shared in a couple different courses. And this is an example essay that a student wrote after doing one of, I think, Ethan's personal statement courses. And we'll walk through just some key highlights of her particular essay that really underscore that she has a clear topic There are strong examples and specific and visual examples in each body paragraph of her essay that help demonstrate who she is, as well as some of those core values that are really central to her. That's question number 3. And then the other piece here is insight. So insight is essentially that so what moment where, instead of writing, like, say, for example, you're involved in band and you're like, I get up at 7 a.m., we go to band practice, I put on the tuba, we learn some music, I went home. That would be an example of a paragraph with no insight. You are solely giving a play-by-play of how you spent your day, but I have no sense as a reader of how you felt kind of going through that day. Was there a particular piece of music or interaction in band that really had you think differently about yourself as a musician? Or had you have some kind of larger insight or aha moment or light bulb about, hey, I didn't realize that, the time signature actually functions this way. And then when I realized that, much easier for me to be able to master music going forward. Those are the kind of things and details that solely giving a play-by-play is just kind of giving a sequence of events, but it's not really giving me as a reader a sense of how those events have shaped you, how they've helped you grow, how they've helped you come to some bigger life realizations. And ideally, you want to have some of those woven in your personal statement in some way, shape, or form. So this is essay. It does a wonderful job at folding in lots of different insights, lots of different values that are central to who she is. And there's also some opportunity for vulnerability in this essay. So just a quick note on that. Vulnerability is something that is a great way to build a connection with a reader in your college personal statement. It's not a requirement by any means. At College Essay Guide, we like to talk about the great college essay test. It's essentially, does your essay possess values? Does it have vulnerability? Are there insights woven throughout? And is it well crafted? Is it well put together? Is there some thought in terms of the way that you wrote the story? It wasn't just slapped together, right? And really sloppily. It's a majority rules kind of test. It's not like you need to get 100%. Ideally, you have at least 2 out of those 4 things that I just mentioned in your personal statement. Not all personal statements are super vulnerable, and I've read amazing personal statements that have no vulnerability. In my experience, however, and I know Hannah really agrees with this as well, is that vulnerability can really be a really great way to show that it's not just all about achievements and perfection. College admission officers are really used to reading students who have lots of different things that they've accomplished in their school, and they have strong grades, and they've been involved in a few things, and those achievements, they get their time in the sun, right? There's an activities list, there's your recommenders who you don't usually read their recommendations, but let me tell you, they're writing good things about you. So sometimes this is maybe one of the moments that you have in the personal statement or in the application to tear down that wall and really kind of show that, I'm not a perfect person. I've done some great things that I'm really proud of. And at the same time, it wasn't always that way. And sometimes it was hard to get to that point. I had to overcome some personal insecurities or barriers, or things just weren't perfect all the time. And that's really normal and human. And when you have a human reader on the other end, that's a really great way to think about, showing them that you're human too. Okay. But just to dive into this essay, I'm not going to read the whole thing just for the sake of time. But I will read the introduction just because it does show that the theme, the topic of her essay is really, really clearly fleshed out in these first few paragraphs here, these first 2 sections. So, throwing caution to the wind and succumbing to her curiosity, Pandora cracked open the lid and peeked inside of a beautiful box gifted to her by Zeus. Immediately, a slew of wicked spirits came rushing and flooded earth with greed, war, and pain, and a legion of other evils that turned man against man and man against the world. Because Pandora made this disastrous mistake, fossil fuels pollute our atmosphere, great creatures are poached onto the brink of extinction, and people continue to hold others down to raise and protect their status. I may not have the brain or brawn of a great mythical hero, but I am a feminist, phenomenon, social activist, and environmental warrior who is ready to ally with Greek gods to save planet Earth. All right. So already right from the start in these 2 short paragraphs, which really didn't take up a whole lot of words, right? If we were to kind of look at this, it's about 127 of her 650 words personal statement, but we have a really clear sense about, as a reader, what I'm about to dive into. There is a sense that the student is going to connect lessons that Greek gods and goddesses have taught her in terms of shaping her values and in shaping her identities as a feminist, a social activist, an environmental warrior. So as a reader, that is kind of what I'm expecting to be diving into through the application, but I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look. And it's making me interested to read more and get a sense of how this student specifically identifies and lives out these values of being a feminist, an activist, and an environmental warrior. We also get a sense from this first paragraph, she connects her love for books and love for reading to the goddess Athena in Greek mythology, who is the goddess of wisdom. And as you move through the essay, you'll see that many different values are being kind of communicated in these particular paragraphs. So from this, even this middle section of this first paragraph here, where she lists off different books that have really inspired her, you get a sense from literally the words that she's writing here: empathy, sensitivity, leadership, grace. These are all things that would have been included on her values exercise early on. And she found ways to cite specific books. Proper nouns are always great in personal statements because, again, they distinguish you from other students who say, I like reading, right? What do you like to read? What types of books really draw your curiosity? It often says a lot about you and distinguishes you from other students. And then insight, right? You know, are there 2 to 3 insights throughout your essay? Here's one of them, right? The insight here is that learning something is one thing, but putting it into practice is another. And she really is describing the importance of mentorship in coming to life realizations. So that's something that is the insight that's kind of flushed out in this particular paragraph. This middle paragraph is where we actually get a little bit more vulnerability, because she's kind of talking about relationships with her brothers and how Artemis, the god of hunting, is kind of her ideal mentor here to be more fearless and speak up when her brothers, who are 6'1" and 6'6", are doing their brotherly thing, right? Putting a little sister down. She then kind of transitions that to other ways that she's kind of channeled out that fearlessness in her life. And some of the ways and specific examples that she's giving here, not just don't just communicate her fearlessness, but we're also kind of getting a sense for responsibility, self-control, grace, again, with the topics that she's decided to take on, and her level of responsibility to her studies and her classes, and going the extra mile on a 36-page research paper, right? And then lastly, her last body paragraph is about ways that she is a social activist and advocate. And she's giving lots of specific examples of ways that she's done that in her home state. And again, there's also not just listing off, here's all the amazing things that I've done, therefore I'm an activist. She's actually mentioning how these 2 mentors of hers, Athena and Artemis, influenced the way that she goes about this work. It's not just I did these things, but I had to be thoughtful and reasonable at some of the ways that I put forward these stories. And I like to show fearlessness and headstrong sincerity as well. And I rely on lessons from mentors that have shaped me to accomplish this. It then leaves with a final insight, basically along the lines of combating socialized and conditioned thinking of women requires action. And she's committed to taking that challenge head on. And she kind of leaves that forward focus with the end of the statement. So I know it's a lot to go through, but doing some kind of exercise like this, where you're looking over your personal statement, maybe you're bolding some of your values there that are there, highlighting some of those insight sections in those body paragraphs that help distinguish you from other students, and show that you've come to life realizations by your actions, and then possibly underlining vulnerability if that happens to be included. It's not a requirement by any means, but definitely can, I think, help build that connection with the reader. All right, Hannah, take it away with a challenge.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So as an English teacher, I used to always tell my students that in order to be a good writer, whether you're writing an email or a personal statement, or just a regular essay in class, you need to know 2 things, 2 major things. One is purpose and one is audience. Okay. And so just like how Tom was showing how each different line like showed the different values, sometimes when I work with students on like personal statements, I can see that some of the information is more just giving context and students don't know where to cut. Try to think about what is the purpose of this paragraph, or what is the purpose of this sentence. If you can't identify the purpose of it, you could probably just remove it. Okay, so it's just certain scans that you can do there. And the audience is also really important. I think sometimes students just kind of write into this void without thinking about who this person is. So the person who's going to be reading your essay is somebody who is reading a lot of them and is probably very tired and is going to read them very quickly. And so if you think about, and I've been using this analogy lately, is if you're like me, I know I'm a bit older, but I'm definitely on TikTok. Not on TikTok. I'm like looking at TikToks. I'm looking at TikToks or Instagram Reels, and you're scanning through them pretty quickly, right? You have to imagine that they're maybe not as quite as quickly with your applications, but you have to kind of like establish like what you're trying to say like pretty clearly. And that's why we have these questions for you, so that it's very clear what you're trying to show to your audience. Okay. And so sometimes, like, so we're talking about challenges right now. Is your challenge clear? I think sometimes students don't realize that when they're writing it, it's actually not that clear. You have to make it as clear as possible. This is not an English class essay where they're going to have time to dissect different analogies and different metaphors that you're putting out there. They need to just get through it in one shot. They're not going to go back and appreciate your writing and all those things. Okay. This is not an essay contest. This is an opportunity for you to show the readers who you are. You're trying to allow them to piece together this human being. And Tom spoke earlier about vulnerability, and to not show that you're like necessarily perfect or just all you do is achieve things. It's literally to create like this human being in your application. Okay. And so and also it's not a like you call it like the trauma Olympics either, right? They're not trying to let in the saddest story either, right? And so be very clear what your challenges are, right? Is it clear what the effects were? Because that's what just differentiates your like challenge with somebody else's who may have gone through a similar challenge, right? Is it clear what I've done to overcome my challenge? Because if you don't have the overcome part, maybe that's not the challenge you want to write about. I just saw in the questions, there is actually a very like, it was like, should I write about this or this? The second one sounds pretty intense. And I'm kind of curious to hear more about that story, but also I'm more curious about what you did, how you came out of it, because sometimes I use this analogy a lot. Like when you're telling a sad story, you're almost like bringing the reader into like this pit of despair with you. The essay has to have enough room for you to pull them out of that pit, because we want to see that you're a strong person, that no matter what obstacles you go through, you're going to be amazing, that you're coming out as like this victorious person, and that we're not going to be worried about you when you get to campus, right? And so is it clear like what you learned from the experience? Because again, it's not about just this is what happened, this is what happened. And so the South Park creators actually talked about their golden rule for keeping your story captivating. And they talk about how every beat of storytelling, if it's always, and then this happened, and then this, and then this, that it's not exciting. I'm just gonna keep swiping up, right? But you have to have this happened, and therefore this happened, or this happened, but this happened, and therefore this happened. The therefores really matter, right? And so you have to really think about like, why does this matter? It doesn't matter if you went through a really, really, really hard hardship. Why does that matter? How has that made you grow? And all those things. So we're going to go over a sample essay to kind of demonstrate how this works. So this is by the way, someone asked a great question. It was like, do you need to title your essays? You do not need to title them. We just title them so that like it's easy for us to identify these. You do not have to put a title. It's not expected. And another thing I wanted to point out is it does not matter what prompt you choose. Okay. We literally say just pick topic of your choice, because Tom, you could probably confirm like some admissions officers don't even read the prompt. You guys, yeah, right? Yeah, they don't even read the prompt. They just read your essay.
Or the personal statement. For the personal statement.
For the personal statement, yes.
Really got to do the prompt. Yeah.
Yes, it's like completely opposite of the supplementals. There's clear intentions for those. Yeah, you have to think about, again, your audience. Why are they asking me this? Right? Personal statement is just to get to know you personally, right? And so here we go. So this is the hearing loss essay, and you'll see here, basically she talks about how she opens it up, showing us just kind of like perspective into like who she is, like what she's going through. And she had just had surgery on her left ear to have bilateral cochlear implants for profound deafness. This is just the start of her journey, right? So then she goes into the effects, right? I was a kid who had to spend hours after school rebuilding my speech and language skills with a speech therapist, the one who always wore my hair down so no one would notice the implants. I love these images because someone else maybe who also went through this experience of profound deafness, they may not write it exactly this way, right? These are very personal moments that she remembers that we can actually imagine. The one at the sewing parties would pretend I had to go to the bathroom so no one would see me take them off. And every night I had to remember to charge my battery so I could hear the next day. So these are all very personal effects. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is, so her challenge is very clear. And I think there are more effects that's coming into the next slide. So here, on top of all this, it really affected her at school. Like, for example, the teachers had a microphone they were supposed to use in class, but she was afraid to tell them to turn it on because she didn't want to bring attention to herself. So super shy. She had to review classmates' notes. She basically had to do a lot more to even earn her grades, right? And so she's providing that context for her application. But there's one, oh, so also a really one part here I want to show here is I remember so strongly feeling a feeling of unfairness. I was the only student in my school who had to deal with these issues. So we're going to show you kind of like this, we call it our feelings and needs exercise that actually asks you to write in your feelings. And she literally just says, I felt like this was so unfair, right? And so it allows us in this vulnerability for us to connect with her and establish, like, feel like she trusts us, the reader. So, but there's one area she didn't feel like this, and that was dance, right? And so, you can go on to the next slide. So the effects were definitely clear, and then so now we're wondering, what does she do to actually overcome this challenge, right? So going to the next part. So she decides, I'm going to connect to my deafness. She starts an internship with a speech pathologist for the first time interacting with other people with hearing loss. Then she realizes, you see here, oh, so she does all this independent study. It's like she's trying to take control of something that she feels is like kind of weighing her down. Then she goes into this leadership opportunities for teens program, promotes leadership skills, does all these things despite her limitations. And she realizes that other people are actually like way more like made fun of and bullied for their I guess like disadvantages. And she realizes like, gosh, like I've actually had a really supportive community. And so you can see there's this level of maturity, right? This like, she's not like a child anymore. And then she sees that she's capable of more. So let's go to the next part. So then she starts to advocate for herself, right? Instead of feeling overwhelmed, I feel proud of my abilities. The fact that she's keeping up with her hearing peers. So she's not a victim anymore. She's this victorious person. She feels more relaxed in school. She has done all these different activities. And I've even worked with a student who had like a visual impairment, and she was so used to it that she didn't realize that like being in like photography class or like video editing class, like how much harder it is for her than other students. And actually writing this out made her realize how much she really had done so much. And so I tell students all the time, you're not writing in order to be understood, you're writing in order to understand yourself. And so this process could actually help you with that. And it's so beautiful when other people can see it too. So I love this last line where it says, and every time a teacher forgets to turn on the microphone, I raise my hand in front of the entire class and remind the teacher to please turn it on. And she does. And you want to like root for her, right? And like I say to Tom all the time, like, it makes me want to like meet this student or not meet this student. Sometimes I don't want to meet that student because they seem so like not human or something, or like too achievement heavy. So let's go to the next slide here. So is it clear what I learned from the experience, right? So if you go to the last part, there's a little bit left of the essay. I spent my whole life dealing with my hearing loss and the obstacles through my path. Looking back, basically, I see it as a blessing, and I am brave now. I can overcome obstacles, and it shows like how she's learned from that experience. Yeah. So moving on, you can definitely do this yourself with the feelings and needs exercise. So I know that some of you may have already written your essay and you're like, what? I'm not going to start over. You do not have to start over, but something that you should probably check for is definitely to make sure that the effects are different from everybody else's. So one example that I give is, we're in California. There are a lot of fires here. It's really sad because sometimes students will have, multiple essays where they're writing about like a similar event, but the effects need to be different. If it sounds like someone else's essay, they're going to just assume, oh, I've read this essay before, and just kind of move on quickly, right? You don't want that to happen. And so you don't have to have the feelings and needs, but the needs part is really cool because it really gets you to think deeply about and kind of processing what you had gone through. So what I did in the lessons and values are really, really important. So make sure that, again, you have enough room in your essay to pull yourself out of that pit of despair. Okay.
Flawless.
Yeah.
Thank you so Hannah. In the spirit of, as Hannah mentioned, not scrapping and starting from scratch, this little section of the webinar is meant to be 3 ways to improve your activities list. And I honestly think this should ideally not take you all that long. If you've already finished your activities list, take a look over it and see if there's any opportunities to do maybe 1, 2, or possibly all 3 of the things that we see here on the screen. 1, packing the space afforded to you with pride and personality. You can see that I love alliteration and assonance on the slide. Determine whether or not you need to explain or establish your activity or prioritize initiative and impact in your activities list descriptions as well. Because again, they're small, they're 150 characters. That does not mean that if you do something that is self-explanatory like basketball, you should write self-explanatory. This was literally one time I read an application and this was the one entry that a student put in for all their activities. And I was like, missed opportunity. I, as a reader, don't really want to root for you because I don't feel like you put any energy or effort into this. And I have no idea what basketball means to you or how you showed up on that team. So instead, pack it with pride and personality, right? You can be proud to be an integral part of a driven, championship winning team. That's great. On the other end of the coin, oh, someone's joining. On the other end of the coin, you can also mention your personality and the way that you show up on the basketball team. Like, for example, this student being the team baker and bringing like baked goods to share after you win or lose games to replace the lost sugar and salt. Sometimes students wonder, can I be like cutesy or like more colloquial or like fun in my activities list? Yes, you absolutely can. Especially if it's natural to the way that you speak and the way that you engage with other people. This type of style is not everyone's thing. Not everyone's like quirky Zooey Deschanel or whoever the Gen Z or Gen Alpha version of her is. But if this is the way that you kind of talk with people or showcase your personality, the person in admissions is a real human being. And this is a breath of fresh air to the really dry, stale, in the same exact way, activities list description or things like self-explanatory, which are quite frankly, very lazy. Tip number 2, you're going to have activities. Typically most students, by the way, most students on the common application fill out 5 to 7 activities. So if you do not have all 10, do not worry. You are among friends. So among your activities, it's pretty typical for students to have things that are pretty niche or very specialized, maybe to their own experience. Maybe it's a club that's like, named by your school's mascot. So a person in admissions reading it would be like, I have no idea what Alpaca Club is. It's like an alpaca, alopecia fundraising effort. Name Alpacares to someone reading through it quickly is lost on them, right? So in that situation, you need to explain what the activity is because it's unfamiliar to a reader who doesn't know your school or doesn't know what you've been involved in. But if you're in drama club or you're on the debate team, that's pretty obvious what it actually is in terms of play-by-play because there's drama clubs and debate teams all over the world, right? And they're not all that different from one another. But what is different is you and the way that you show up and the way that you establish yourself and your presence and your skills and your roles and identities within particular club, organization, or activity. So maybe you're the mom friend with Band-Aids, always make sure that the skid knees stay antibacterialized. Maybe you're the one who puts together the hype playlist on the way to academic decathlon nationals. And that's a way to, again, put in a little subtle brag that, yes, we're a national championship winning team, by the way, too, but like we also have fun on the way there, right? So establishing your role, establishing how you show up in that more common activity that is going to be understandable or obvious to an admission officer is a great tip. And then lastly, prioritizing initiative and impact. So say you've been involved in things in high school, such as a fundraiser, or you did a tutoring program that was meant to reach several numbers of students or schools, elementary schools, whatever it may be. It's great to be able to move away from generalities, like, for example, raising money to donate to a school in India. Do you know how many students were impacted by your efforts, right? Can you give a little more specific action verbs that talk about all the different things that you did when you were putting that fundraiser together, rather than just, I raised money, right? To raise money, you had to arrange advertising events. You organized fundraisers. These are all different skills, these action words, arranged, organized, presented. They're showing that you have multiple skills that this raising money initiative helped you develop, and you had a positive impact on other people. Similar example here, raise money for children in Africa. Many students are involved in different service work, right? So it's best if you're able to quantify and kind of give a sense for the specificity of who benefited from your work, what exactly you did. That's a much better way to show your initiative and impact that is going to distinguish yourself, just like Hannah showed with the hearing loss essay, from other students doing similar things in their community. Okay. This is that last section before we go into kind of a little bit of a preview of an application that we feel like great job doing all the things. Is there is someone honking outside that is so aggressive, and thank God it's not on Zoom, but so distracting. Okay.
We can hear it a little bit, just a little bit. That means
That's
it's
how
really
bad
loud.
it is. Two qualities your supplemental essay should demonstrate. Okay, number one, what you'll contribute to the college campus that you are heading to, and number two, fit for campus. Here are the kind of questions listed here on the screen, but we're going to walk through some example essays to better understand these two boxes that you see on the screen. So, Han, I want to take it away with what you'll contribute.
Yes. And so remember, it is not a why them essay. It's a why you belong together, why us essay, because they already know they're great. They already know that they're hot and popular and everyone wants to be with them, and they're really rich too. And so if you tell them going to your school is going to really help me do these things, they already know that, right? They literally know that. That's why everyone's trying to apply there. So it's really, really important for you to say, I've already recognized this about you. I noticed these things about you, what you value and all that. And this is how me being at your school is going to be this wonderful relationship, right? And so what you'll contribute is really, really important. I think sometimes students are like, I'm only like 17, 18 years old. How do I know what I'm going to contribute? So seriously, it's like, it's not like they're going to be like, when you get in, like, oh, you didn't do these things or something. Just show that you want to give back, right? That's like a big thing. And so I was even talking to a student yesterday about, like, imagine if like Caltech or MIT, right? If they were just looking for the smartest students, they could ultimately be creating like future like weapon creators, right? Then that's ultimately not what they want. They want people to actually use their education for something good, right? Like, if it was truly just the smartest people, I mean, our world would look different, right? And so they really do care about that and how you're going to contribute and actually benefit other people and not just use them to improve yourself, right? And so, and I know that there are a lot of questions about that and around diversity as well. And so you could use the roles and identities exercise that Tom talked about earlier, or if you want to actually really do a deep dive into what are some of my social identities, there is another brainstorming exercise here that takes a little bit longer, but it's truly, truly revealing of like even beyond race or even with your race, just like how much these things matter to you. And so try to be as like thorough as you can. And it's like a really, really great exercise. If you really, really knew me exercise is another way for you to do a deep dive. I know, again, it's October and you might be like, when am I ever going to do this? But if you really want to have this introspective experience, you can definitely do that. We have lots of other resources on how to answer the diversity prompts. I know a lot of students have been struggling with this, like wondering if they're expecting a specific type of answer, and it's not. They just really want to know who you are as a person and how that identity has made you who you are, right? And so they want to be able to see, yeah, all those things there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The next one. So I think we have examples. Yes. So weaving identities in here. So say, for example, the student decides to say, you know, my identity is actually a people person, right? Identities aren't always around race or sexual identity and those kinds of things. And it doesn't have to be like the scary word. I feel like a lot of people like find it to be something really complex and almost like a taboo thing to talk about when it's not. We just want to know who you are. And like, there was a slide that I had in a different presentation where identity is actually the etymology of it is like repeated beingness, right? It's like, who are you? Like, how many times have you like done this specific thing? Like, this person talks to people very regularly, so this is a people person. It's part of the identity. So I really like how they show very, very clear examples of how they do this. Someone else cannot put their name on top of this and say, hey, that's exactly my experience, right? They have very, very personal experiences here. And even here, I believe that connecting with people is a two-way street. Through my experiences, I fostered a diverse set of values, and this is how I'm going to contribute. Whether I'm making a queen sacrifice on the chessboard, next to teammates at, in this chess team. So they've definitely done some research. I would enjoy connecting with my brown classmates and contributing to the broader community. So they're being very, very specific on those things. And something that we do at College Guide too is whenever you mention something specific about the school, we might bold it just to make sure that like you're actually also showing that you really want to go to that school, because I'm sure you're writing supplements to certain schools where they're probably maybe your third, fourth, or fifth choice. You still need to make them think that they're your number one choice, right? And so you don't want to like completely like copy and paste from a different essay if it's not applicable. So yeah, so you could definitely do that. That could be one way to kind of use as a theme throughout. Um, and so this one, oh yes, okay. So the research for this is very important. I think a lot of times we see students kind of researching kind of like surface level, like different traditions or colors and like all those things. You guys, if it's that easy to find, then everyone else is writing about that. They're kind of tired of it, right? And so you, again, you don't want them to skim like, oh, they're not going to say anything specific, right? And so for every reason in your essay, you want to be specific as to why that matters. Again, it's not a, and then this is why, and then this is why. It's, I want this, therefore, so that I could do this, or, you know, so that we could do this together type of things. Schools want students that they can brag about later in the future, right? And so they want to see not, again, what you've already done in your past, but where you're headed, right? So that, you know, that's why we use the term like forward focused a lot, because it's like, I get that you want to study math, but why? Like, why does that matter? A lot of people want to study math, right? Or CS, or, you know, English, or whatever it is. Why do you want to do that, right? And so so definitely look at, is this something someone else can say, or is it only something I can say? So there's that. And yes, and so this one meshes together fit and identity. So this is with a older NYU prompt about why us, but I felt like it really shows like very well just how you can do this. So this person says, I embody two personas. The first, a young Muslim woman passionate about social justice, and the second, an aspiring, unbounded traveler and global citizen. And so it's really, really great how like you can like put together this picture of the student. And again, they want to admit human beings, right? Not just numbers and achievements and things. And so, so it establishes their identities, but then it says, I know my ambivert itself will thrive at USC, and is very specific as to where they're going to contribute there too. So, and I know that sometimes students think like, oh, I wonder like if people are really reading these things, right? I remember I was at a former student's like graduation at Georgetown, and I was there when the dean said, I still remember your essay, and like that you needed to be here. You know, it's like, it's pretty amazing how like sometimes like admissions officers still remember those things. So yeah.
Yet another feminine example here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly walk back to this slide here, just to again distinguish these two qualities, right? So there's what you'll contribute, and as we hopefully have underscored that with that people person example, identity is really broad. And the exercises that we have linked in the chat and that you'll be getting as a follow-up email will really kind of help you flesh out the breadth of what you possibly can cover for these essays. Because when you first might see the prompt and the way it's written, you may think to yourself, I feel like I don't really have anything to say on this, but everyone does. It might just take a little bit of brainstorming and a little bit of tools to kind of figure out what your thing is and what your contribution makes the most sense. Something I would caution maybe you about is Hannah and I have worked with lots of students who really want to have their identity be their extracurricular identity. So I'm a soccer player. I'm going to play soccer at your school. Okay, sure. And at the same time, kind of like I said with the activities list, I'm more curious to know how you show up in that team and like what your particular personality, your strengths, your gifts, your talents, your values, how those have positively influenced your team and are going to positively influence our team and therefore our school more broadly, right? So I think with these what you'll contribute essays, it's great to kind of consider some alternate identities beyond the theme of kind of like the way that you spent your time, because again, it's harder to distinguish yourself when you're just saying, I identify as a drama kid. Show us a little more about what that's actually like in your world, and how that's going to positively influence the campus environment. Okay. And then when it comes to fit, something that's really important as well is showing that you've done. So we have supplemental essay guides at College Essay Guide. There's guides for over 80 schools that go into every single blog entry usually begins with a mission statement for a school and a strategic plan if it's available. And these are really important because as someone who used to write supplemental essays for Pomona College, which is one of the 5 undergraduate Claremont colleges, we literally referenced our own mission and vision and strategic plans and directives from the board of trustees and the college leadership and the college president when writing those questions. And we were hoping from students to show specific examples from their lives that show that they are in alignment with Pomona's mission, that they are down for what we're all about, the way that we structure our classes, the way that our curriculum is designed. Pomona was all about probing, inquiry, and creative learning. Also, the mission statement has lots of references to global community, globalism, right? Multiculturalism, diversity. So students who are writing about that, they're down for that. Maybe they come from environments where they didn't have a lot of diversity and they're excited to be in a place where they have more of that now. Or they've really creatively solved or had an interdisciplinary approach to lots of different problems. It was students who were communicating those types of examples that we were more likely to admit because they showed an alignment with our own mission and values, right? So same thing with, what you contribute in terms of, what Hannah was mentioning, the fit piece from a mission standpoint is really critical. So the Claremont colleges, they're all 5 undergraduate colleges that are in 1 square mile in California, and you can take classes at any of the 5 schools, but all 5 of them are really different, even though they're all liberal arts colleges. Pomona is kind of the broadest of them. Pitzer's like all about social justice and sustainability and kind of activism. Claremont McKenna is a lot about leadership and business and law, government politics. Harvey Mudd's all about STEM. And Scripps is an all-women's college that really was centered to be a college for women, right? And that's a big part of their mission. It's a big part of who they are. So what I want to actually have you do is just take a quick few minutes, and Diana's going to release a poll here to look over these 2 particular supplemental essay prompts for Scripps. The question is basically, talk about, who you are, your identity, what you value, and how will that help, like basically what will you contribute to the Scripps community, and how are you in alignment with our mission and values. So I want you to kind of read through both of these and give a sense of which one you think is doing a better job. And I'll kind of give like 30 seconds to do that. Sometimes I wish that Hannah and I use when we do workshops in schools, there's this tool called Pear Deck where you can't see how other people are responding until the poll is released. I don't know if that's happening now, if people are able to see it or if it's just me. Can you see it, Hannah or Hannah?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go and end the poll. And it will show that response A for most of you is the one that is most in line with Scripps' mission. And that is absolutely true. Neither of these are what I would call bad responses, right? They both answered the question, but there was one key difference between response A and response B here, is that response A is really kind of emphasizing that the student is really interested in being part of a women's college. That is the type of environment that they feel like they can flourish. Those are the types of causes that are really central to who they are. And so all of the examples really tie to the identity, the mission statement at the top here, Scripps' mission to educate women to develop their intellects and talents through active participation in the community, contributing to society, leadership, service, integrity. That's not to say student B isn't doing that. It's not to say that they don't have goals, that they're not going to contribute to society, but one of the biggest rationales that the student's putting forward, which is not a wrong or bad rationale, is that I like Scripps College, a women's college, because it's part of the Claremont colleges, 5 schools, and I can take classes at all the other schools. If your rationale is that the other schools are one of the biggest attracting points to you for Scripps, you're not really showing that Scripps specifically is the one that is the best match for you or a match for your values, right? So it's not to say it's bad to like the other Claremont schools. It's a huge advantage to going to Scripps. However, with this essay opportunity, really take that as a chance to show how Scripps really appeals to you, how it aligns with who you are. And the same can be said for all the other 4 Claremont colleges that we didn't do this exercise for. So hopefully that helps illustrate the value of a mission statement, a strategic plan, and how that can really help influence your supplemental essays at this stage. We're pretty short on time, Hannah, but in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'll do it quick. Yes.
Yeah.
So I am going to share my screen here and I'm going to show you just a sample almost done doc. And I'm actually going to answer some of the questions that were brought up in the Q&A section. So if you ever take a look at the outline here, there's tons of stuff. This is 21 pages or something, y'all. So this is her personal statement. I love how she did it on like different rocks that she collects, or crystals. It was crystals. And I don't have enough time to go over it, but I wanted to kind of show you a behind the scenes of how we kind of went through this together. So there's a log line here. If you can't have a log line, which is just a short kind of synopsis of your essay, maybe you need to reorganize some things. So her log line was, by looking at the crystals I've collected, it shows the different characteristics I've developed and values I want to surround myself with. And so each section here, so remember that if you do have some kind of a theme like crystals or whatever it might be, that it's just an excuse to talk about yourself, right? It's not really about the crystals. It's not a crystal essay. It's a you essay. And so we looked at all these different options. She had a lot more than what we used, but I really liked how she knew what her insights were going to be and all those things. So the activities list, you can kind of see there were some questions about like order and things. And I think later on in the Q&A, we can talk about that. So she definitely did this very, these things take time, you guys, like 150 characters actually is not that easy to do. So she definitely put those in here. It looks nice and neat. And I think there was one in particular that like right here, Tom gave an example earlier about talking about, you know, specific amounts and impact and those kinds of things. And so definitely a bit more specific here. And then going into her awards and honors, those are here. Someone asked about the COVID question and if she should, you know, use it to explain something. In this case, this was really around COVID, and she had been so excited to be able to go to Tanzania, and she was like going to, you know, meet with students there and all this stuff, but it was canceled, and she was so sad. And all the things that she wanted to do, it wasn't something that she, you know, it was easy for her to get. And so just letting them know that this was going to happen. But it says here, I was still able to express my interest in the culture by doing research for her anthropology paper. So it just kind of shows she wanted to do something, but do not use this part to talk about something that's not related to COVID. Okay. Additional info section. So someone else asked, actually several people asked, can I use the additional info section to elaborate on some of my activities that goes beyond 150 characters? Yes, but if you notice here, there are not that many that she's elaborating on. I think Tom and I have worked with students where the whole 650 words are used up to explain in like too much, and it just it gets people to again skim it, and the impact isn't really there, and so they don't have time to like really like look deeply and stuff like that. So just know that you don't want to like use up all 650 characters just explaining your additional activities. So you'll see here all the different supplemental essays. I really like hers because it shows so many different interests that she has beyond school. So this one was definitely, it wasn't just sewing at home. She was actually using it and designing different things. And you'll see that there's so many different supplementals. One of them I really wanted to show was how silly you can be sometimes. So yes, there's for Wake Forest, it was like, what are the books that you've read? She definitely read a lot of books. But there was this avocado one. It was like, give us your top 10. And she just took a risk, and she was like, 10 ways to eat or use an avocado. And I loved it. It was just like, man, you're like fun and silly and, you know, all those things. And so it is like to get to know like your personality a little bit. And so, yeah, some of these you'll see like they were able to be recycled. We call them super essays and all those things. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We get to Q&A.
Awesome. I answered a few directly, and I'm happy to stay on a few minutes after 5 p.m. Pacific. Hannah, no pressure to if you have to head out.
Yeah, I could try to say, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So one of the responses that
actually, I think we're gonna do a separate recording for this.
Oh, okay, great. So
Yeah.
1 second, we're gonna